I won't have a white Christmas. I'm going to Egypt, so probably it will be a bit warmer, which I'm excited about.
A sandy Christmas.
Exactly.
Nice.
I will have fat and freezy one. Will gladly swap it with Maïa because I'm going back home to northern Italy. So
Okay.
which means I'm going to have to spend lots of money buying my entire wardrobe by the time I come back because 10 days is of too much food.
Excellent. Let's move your mic up just a little bit. It was a little hard to hear you there. Yeah, much better. I mean, it's one thing to hear about your holiday plans. It's another thing to actually hear them. So it's good. And today we're going to be talking about problems. We've got problems from tech to people, right? It covers all spans. So I'm excited to nail down the definition of problems and then continue to see what definitions we use to help get those identified. Well, I'm here in sunny California, and it's been, I don't think I've ever seen snow on winter or during the holiday, but we make up for it with Christmas lights. So no matter where you are, hopefully there's some sort of snow or replacement Christmas light or something, because it is the holiday type of season. And speaking of which, we are here live on the ScaleUp Academy podcast. It's called it's called ScaleUp Heroes, and this is our 40th episode. This is the last of the year. And I'm excited because we're going to be attacking one of the biggest problems that we have, and that is facing problems. The reality is that we all have problems, big and small, and they tend to work themselves into the workplace, because I argue that nobody cares what you do. As a business owner, as an employee, as a person, nobody cares what you do. Instead, they care about the problem that you solve. And so I'm fascinated with the concept of defining what the right problem is, and then getting into how you would actually approach it. And then you have execution, which is a whole nother conversation. So today, Max is going to lead us through a conversation here around what is the process to define the problems? How do we go about trying to formulate a solution? And what does that whole decision-making process look like? Because when you're past the startup and you're into the scale-up world, you will be facing different problems, problems of scale, problems of growth. So today we're going to focus on those problems when it comes to product. Now, myself, I'm Ryan Foland. I'm a global keynote speaker talking about how business leaders can use the problems that they solve to create differentiation. And on this podcast, we bring in experts, people that are wearing capes, whether you can see them or not, because they've been there and done that. If you want to catch other ones, you can go to scaleupacademy.io. And at this point, Max, I am going to wrap up a problem into a present. I am going to send it to you virtually so you can help us unpack this problem definition and solving process so we can execute a bit better. Take it away.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ryan. I think what's worth doing is, giving a brief intro of myself, the panelists, and then we'll dive straight in. So my name's Max Eskell. I'm the head of products for Monese, a fintech based in London, but we have customers all over Europe and hopefully soon the world. And what I'll do is I'll now introduce our other speakers and ask them to sort of introduce themselves. So Maïa, would you like to say a brief introduction about yourself?
Sure. So I'm Maïa. I'm currently the VP of product at Aircall. I discovered product in a SaaS San Francisco-based startup that's called I Feel Goods. Then I moved to BlaBlaCar, which is a French car-sharing company. And I joined Aircall a bit more than 2 years ago and basically built the product team here from 0 to 15. So a couple words about Aircall. So basically, we're building a cloud-based phone system. In terms of scaling, well, we raised a 30 million Series B earlier this year, and we're currently around 150 employees.
Fantastic. Thanks, Maïa. Cinzia?
Hello, I'm Cinzia. I work for Cognism, which is lead generation and refresher data and outbound for a marketing and sales team. So again, it's a SaaS in B2B. I've only been here for 4 months, been in task and I've been hired to actually set up product function. And before I was for 9 years at Brobeam Technology, which is a global leader of multi-searching technology for the recruitment industry, where I was the first product manager. I ended up leading a team of 7 people looking after all the different work streams globally.
Perfect. Bartek, can you say a few things about yourself?
Hi, yeah. I'm Bartek Kunowski, and I am VP of Product at Glovo. Glovo, we're a Barcelona-based company which builds an app for users to order products from any store in their city and get it delivered to them on demand. We're 3 years old. I joined fairly early on in the company. We're live in over 20 countries across Europe, Latin America, and Africa. And I've scaled, so I've been in charge of product scaling it from when we were doing 200 orders a day to now over 100,000 orders a day. And so our tech team, which includes product and design, is about 60 people. And we have very aggressive growth plans over the next 12 months to probably triple or quadruple the team size.
Amazing. I think it's great to hear some panelists that are going through very similar problems that I'm facing. I'm really looking forward to hearing some answers and some different opinions, and definitely learning something. As Ryan said, solving problems is what we do. That's why customers buy our products, and that's why customers use us. So one of the things that we need to do as product people is, as a business, and also to help our teams, is making sure that we solve the right problems. So what I'd really love to hear from the panelists is, to start with, let's keep it at the business level, is how, sort of as the product leader in your organization, how do you make sure that you as a business are solving the right problems? Maïa, can we jump to you to start with?
Sure. Well, I think we could talk about this for hours, because this is basically, the core of our jobs. I just, want to pick two things that I found specifically useful and meaningful in the team. The first one is that I really strived to make it a process to clarify this problem that we want to solve. So about 2 years ago, I discovered the intermission document by Intercom. I don't know if you know it, but basically I found it super interesting, and I stole it and adapted it for Aircall. So this is typically a document that each of the PM has to come up with for every project we're working on. And it has to, in one page, recap what's the problem, why it's important to solve it, for whom do we want to solve it, what's the criteria for success, and what's out of scope for this project. And so I personally spend a lot of my time challenging the PMs to the maximum on that document. If the definition of success is not clear, they need to go back and work on it. If, again, the why we want to solve it is not clear, probably means they're an issue. And so this has been tremendously helpful to help us as a product team focusing on the right problem. And then the second thing is making sure that everyone, every team knows what their North Star metric is. So we've got about 10 teams today, so tech teams, so like 5 developers, 1 PM, 1 product designer. And all of those is focused towards one of our 3 macro product objectives for the year. So typically we have 1 towards expansion, 1 towards satisfaction, 1 towards integrating with other services. And so, well, it's pretty standard, not rocket science here, but this really is driving the decision-making process towards all steps of the way. So for the roadmap, for the trade-offs, for the feature scope, for the follow-up after that. And so the role of the executive level, myself and the rest of the leadership team, is really to align on the percentage of resources we want to allocate to each of those 3 objectives. So typically we did that December last year, and we refined it this year twice according to, business context, before the fundraising, after the fundraising. Typically that was one big criteria, as you can imagine. But yeah, having those North Star metrics, agreeing on the percentage of bandwidth, and then communicating that clearly to the teams.
Fantastic. I think, in terms of, stealing and adapting, that's what all good product leaders do. Most of the problems we faced have been solved by somebody else. So let's use the 80% solution that somebody else has built. I love that. And
right.
your kickoff, I think, you've got some organizations are famous for how they start projects. You've got the Amazon 6-pager. We use something. We use a meeting. It's a product kickoff. So the teams present to the whole organization and say, look, this is what we're going to build and why. Answering, I think some of the similar questions to you in terms of definition of success. and the North Star metric, I think that's super key as well. Cinzia, I'd love to hear how your team does it.
So on my perspective, so what I've experienced is that normally the problem facing it can be faceted in different ways. So there are situations where you have a list of things that have been assessed as to being problems, so you have to find solutions for those. So there it comes to how you prioritize them. And I think I'm going to get back to that in a second. And there are other situations where you have different problems that comes in, so it's not a defined list and you're not sure even if there is a problem underneath that you have to assess. And I normally divide this into two categories. I divide them into inward and outward. So the inward is what I would define as problems that somehow comes from outside of the organization into the organization, whether it is from clients directly to product or from clients via sales and customer success. And outwards is what comes from within the organizations. So typically speaking, goes totally the opposite way. So it goes from tech into product, and then product has the role of interpreting, translating those problems into the wider organization so that they get taken into account. In terms of prioritization, one of the main experience that I've had is after having rebuilt, and this was actually not a Cognism, but it was a Bluebeam technology, after having rebuilt entirely a new version of a product from a legacy system into modern application, having finally the time in your roadmap to address all the fun features, all the extra requests that is well beyond MVP. And having a defined list of those, but obviously you never have the time to do all of them. So as what I've done is I've done a game storming session where we prepped cards with all the descriptions, and we invite different exponents from different departments in the business. In tech, we set ahead of time, and we defined with t-shirt sizes how much each one of those were in terms of development effort. But what we asked the audience was to define the business impact without telling them the development effort. And we ended up mapping them on a axis and then calculating precisely the weight of each one of them, meaning that the one with the highest points was also the one that will be built first because it had highest business impact but low development effort. And that's a very cool exercise. It's also quite insightful because often what you find is that the people themselves that have asked for certain features might end up deciding to drop them in face of all the other features. So it stimulates the type of discussion within the business. In those terms, if anyone is ever interested in exercises of this kind, there is a fabulous book that it has helped me through years, game storming. You can find it on Amazon. I'm not one of the authors, I promise, but I just found that it has always been very useful. One last thing that I would like to touch on though is when you will receive problems. I'm actually a big advocate of not waiting to these problems, but actually going out and seeking problems before clients give them to you. And if you look at those, like one of the most obvious ways is yes, analytics and monitoring, but one of my most favorite techniques are going to floor walks, so where you can observe the users and also utilizing other tools, whether it's tools like Food Stories that allow you access to sessions to see the videos. And one of my favorite, most successful tools, or that I found most successful, has been the implementation of user voice on the product platform, which gave visibility to over 17,000, by the time I left my previous company, 17,000 users submitting their feedback, commenting, voting on each other's ideas, commenting on each other's idea, which can turn into a pretty funny exercise to go through, actually.
No, I think that's very insightful. I think, product is either an enviable or an unenviable position in a company because you're commonly the vehicle through which the business generates money or interacts with customers. So lots of people, as you correctly pointed out, internal and external, see you, want you to do things. And I agree, it comes down to prioritization, which sort of ties back into Maïa's point in terms of being able to sort of coordinate that with some North Star metrics. And that's more, as I see it, around setting the strategic context, but then Maïa also mentioned the kickoff, the documents, which sort of is a little bit of a gate there, just to make sure the teams don't start work until the benefit is clear. I think the gainstorming thing, I think that's super interesting. I think, how do you try and balance what you see as important as a sort of a head of product or a VP of product, because you've got your own interests and ideas, and so is the CEO, which is obviously you're the right hand person to sort of execute that, versus allowing the teams to do stuff that they're interested in and what they see as they want to do, or they see where they want to steer the product. So I think that's a really interesting way of trying to sort of do both top down and bottom up. I think very, very, very interesting. Bartek, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think there was lots of really good things said, so I'm not going to repeat all of that stuff. There's one area that, as I moved away from being a product manager myself into managing other product managers, I think there's one at this point in a company, you found your market fit, you found your traction, you set up your high level KPIs for your company. Hopefully you've broken up into product teams and you have all that set up. So you've already kind of created the structure, hopefully in the environment, to make sure that you're more or less working on the right problem. You're not just going off the rails and doing something completely out of the ordinary. So the question at this stage in the company is not, are you completely working on the wrong thing, but given for sure a very long list of opportunities, are you choosing the one that's going to have the highest return on investment, right? That's the question. Is it the right problem that you're working on or not? And so I think one of the, when you're leading a team of product managers, I think one of the kind of not pitfalls, but one of the areas that product managers can not choose the right one is, so they have their teams are defined, they have their mission statements, so on and so forth, and they fall into the trap of just trying to optimize specific features and just do small incremental, we're all into this agile mentality and just, try to do incremental improvements in KPIs. And they stopped thinking about, they don't challenge themselves and their teams to think of ideas that are really going to move the needle forward. And as a product, as a head of product, you have to be very, I really spend a lot of time watching out to make sure that product teams don't fall into that trap of just doing small little iterations, small little improvements, where realistically it doesn't really matter if they get it right, if they get it wrong, or if they don't move it, it's going to move the business by 0.5%. And especially when you're scaling up a company, I think it's really important not to settle in too early into a mode where you're not thinking about features that are really going to move the needle. And so that's my challenge usually to product managers every time they're presenting to me a new quarterly plan or a new project or a new requirements document they're working on. Is this really going to make a big impact on the business? Is it going to move it 10, 20, 30, 40, 100% forward, your core KPIs? Or are you just doing some little minor iterations all the time and not really moving things forward?
Thanks. I think again some great insights there, and I think something that I know Google does. Looking at sort of 60% of stuff is sort of optimization. 30% of stuff is what's the next features that are coming, and the 10% is the the 10x stuff, and this hard often is 10x. And I think thinking about products, thinking about a product as a portfolio of features, and trying to have stuff that's higher risk but higher payoff, and then incremental, and trying to work out where that balance is. And within a product, it's quite difficult. Across a number of products, it's just another, again, order of magnitude harder, which I know I'm struggling with at the moment. How do we make sure that we've got enough stuff to keep the lights on and keep on improving and growing and matching our competitors or being better than our competitors, versus what's next? What's the revolutionary thing that's coming? I think it's incredibly interesting. very fascinating to hear that. I think so. What I'd love to do now is move on to. I think this is we've heard some great examples of how to focus on the right problem. What I'd like to dive into now is how do you solve the problems? Is it one man by himself in a room, coming out with the right answer, or is it hugely Nordic types problem solving where it's hugely consensus based? I'd love to really hear about how the teams or how do you work with your product teams to really sort of, once you found this problem, how do you sort of come up with a solution, or is it a solution, or is it a series of solutions? Super excited to hear. So should we work back the other way? Should we go to you, Bartek, first?
Sure, sounds good. I'm going to try to look to share some insights which are not the most obvious ones. So again, it depends what the problem you're trying to solve. Some are, they're fairly simple. You can do brainstorming. I'm not going to go through all the other ones. I want to talk about one type of problem, which I think a lot of times is product people will say it's one of the hardest problems that they come across. And these are product decisions where there's a trade-off between core KPIs of the business. I think those are the ones that the product people struggle with the most, because obviously if you have a solution to some problem which only has it's only flowers and it's gonna increase the KPI with no negative impacts anywhere, maybe you have to balance that up against another really good decision. But the areas where it's quite difficult is when to solve one problem, it may have a negative impact somewhere else on the business. We operate a three-sided marketplace, and quite often, you make one change in one place, and it may have a negative impact on the other one. So to give you a really good example, from our business, for example, so there's a lot of businesses, a fundamental trade-off between growth and, for example, unit economics, right? So on one hand, you want to make your business profitable. On the other hand, you want to grow as much as possible. Sometimes you can find things to do. It's just going to be full-on growth, and they don't impact the unit economics, and vice versa. And those are ideal. But once in a while, you end up in situations where you have to make a trade-off between the two. And I'll give you an example. In Glovo, for example, when it's raining, people make more orders, and to make sure we have enough couriers to do the fleet, we pay them a bonus. And so what happens is our unit economics takes a big hit because we're paying more and we're collecting the same amount essentially from users. And so one of the, we tried lots of things, but at the end of the day, we said we need to charge users more if we want to get make the unit economics healthy. When it's raining, we're going to charge them for bad weather surcharge. And well, that's the idea someone throws out there, and then you're a product manager, you're in a very tough spot. So what do I do? Well, you can A/B test it, and you can choose a small, you can do a small percentage of, to spend a small percentage of users. Say, well, if I just raise it by €1, it's what's going to happen will affect growth, and maybe you'll find that sweet spot. But that's not probably enough, because a lot of these types of trade-offs between core business KPIs, they actually change over time. So what's acceptable and what's optimal today, for example, maybe right now you're really focused on optimizing for growth. Maybe 3 months from now or 6 months from now, something completely changes, whether you're going to do a new investment round or something, and the business fundamentals changes, the business plan, and all of a sudden, actually, no, the unit economics is a lot more important than the growth. Or even more difficult is you can be like a company like ours, where we are in 20 different markets, and so for a given market, we treat it as a mature one where we're focusing more on profitability, another one more on growth. And some of these, and the way I deal with these from a product perspective, and again, you try not to do this often, but in these types of situations where there is a real trade-off between two KPIs, you build a product in such a way where you don't have to take that decision, where essentially you enable the business, you give the business the levers to be able to adjust and implement. So you build out, like for example, in the case I gave, a customer bad weather delivery fee. And then you allow each, for example, country manager the option to either enable it in their country or not, and to set what is the actual fee themselves, right? So and if 6 months from now they say they want to increase their profitability or take care of that case more, you give them the tools, you empower the business with those tools to make that trade-off. so you don't have to do them on a product level. That was just one case.
I think that's really interesting. We've been down a number of routes. We've got a North Star metric. We've gone through OKRs, and your point about the really tough decisions where it's a trade-off. We've now come to the point where we say OKRs are tools and not rules. This is a tool to guide decision making, not a rule for abstract complete control. So we made the mistake as well, and so we want people that can use these as inspiration for making the right decisions in the interest of the customer and entire business, rather than just purely sort of optimizing for OKRs. So I think that's really, I think I've been there, and I think I've experienced that as well. Cinzia, I'm really interested to hear how you guys go about solving these problems.
Well, I think that first and foremost, it is normally a team effort, and it is a cross-functional effort, as most of us have pointed out also in the previous question. In terms of the process that I go about when solving problems is first and foremost taking a whole helicopter view. So abstract from a number of feedback and see if effectively could you solve more than one problem with one solution. And it's happened to me in the past where, once again, like looking through lots and lots of feedback, I think it was about 300 different entries that they were sent, and they were all about different features, most of all the different functionalities. But reading through all of them, what became clear is that what the customers need, which is pretty much not what they normally tell you that they want, but what the customer needed was a more efficient way to go about to a specific activity that was at the core of one of the products that I managed in the past. And rebuilding the part of the product brought as a benefit addressing all 300 of the problems that were put forward. So I think that is very important. So a product manager, most of all a product leader, can never focus on the single one bit that is put forward to you, and most of all cannot just focus on what the problem is now and we're going to solve it for now. Sometimes you need to make that trade-off. In other cases, you need to think about the future and the expansion, which is particularly important in a scale-up environment, right? Secondly, I normally always have a three-way, a continuous approach. Let's call it like the feedback loop, but it's more like the feedback loop that goes around from within the organization towards the outside of the organizations. And the feedback loop goes tech, business, clients, with product manager in the center. And so if the product manager hear lots of different problems and you start visualizing the solutions, start checking that solution is pretty much what will actually solve the problems. But before going and fully scoping it and communicating it to the business, always start with tech. The developers, I think they are at the very core because you want to see if it's desirable, is it feasible, technically speaking, to do certain type of things. Do they have maybe a better solution, or can they suggest the new technologies through which you could actually solve that problem much better? And then you continue in each iteration. And so basically going in this circle. So you speak to tech and then you propose to the business, and then you also check with customers. You check with customers from, wireframe stages and back and forth, and then through mockups, and then through build and scoping. So that's pretty much the wider approach that I normally take. Okay,
I think especially with Agile, what we've learned recently about software development or how sort of leading edge companies do software, it is highly iterative. I think I completely agree with coming up with a hypothesis, testing it, and then if it's successful, then doubling down and reinforcing on it. But one of the things that we're trying to work through at the moment is how do you make those really big strategic decisions? And I describe a strategic decision as one that can't be undone once you've done it, or is very difficult to undo. You can't sort of pilot it and test it. And if you get it wrong, could sink the company. And we're facing a number of those. Do we launch in which big continent do we launch in next? That could sink the company if we get it wrong. We can't really test it that well or that easily. And so, what I'm trying to work out now is, this is we know what the problem is. Do we expand X or Y? How do we think this problem through and come to a solution or a decision? And I'd love to be able to iterate or run a pilot, but at the moment, there's this decision and some other decisions where we really have to go, okay, it's quite ambiguous, very ambiguous, but we need to place a really big bet. So we're trying to work this out now. Is how do we go about solving these really big problems? Research analysis will help up to a point. You get to a point where you just got to make a decision. And I'd be really interested, maybe coming back to the panel in terms of, Maïa, I'm sure you've faced some problems like this. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think in terms of, those very high level business critical topics, it's very complicated and got even more complicated as we grew as a business and as we went up market. Our clients were larger, which meant bigger consequences. And so for those specifically, well, basically we did sort of a design sprint focused on those big topics. So basically we invited high level stakeholders within the company, VP levels that were really affected by this decision to stay with us for half a day. And we used that time to really explain the big trade-offs and decisions we had to make. And so, of course, we don't do that for all of the features we're working on, but, maybe this year there were like 2 or 3 of them. So this is not something we do every week, but it was very useful for those big, large topics. And after that, the team goes on and builds an MVP. The goal for this half a day is really to validate the big trade-offs. And we found that this actually requires a lot of preparation from the team in terms of, benchmark data, user research in order for that half day to be super effective. But then in general, I think I agree with Cinzia that, it's a team effort. So everyone needs to be involved, business team, tech teams, that's super interesting. But I think if you're coming back to the basics, again, you should involve your users. So this is kind of product 101, but it's not that easy in B2B because you have less users, because they get more frustrated with you, because they're at work, they're stressed, they don't have a lot of time for you. So over the past years, we've had to come up with a bunch of, creative ways to put our user central still in our product processes. So typically this is stuff like automated triggers that warn us every time there's a customer visit planned by an account manager so that someone from the product team can tag along. We also created like a small bot giving us tasks every week in Slack, like you should do support, you should do a client visit. We follow the NPRs very closely, and really I found it more difficult in B2B than in B2C. One of the other things that was helpful was really to, again, involve the business teams as much as possible in that solution crafting process. There's so much info sitting there in a B2B company because you've got account managers, you've got sales reps, and we want to leverage that information as much as possible. So one of the things that we found helpful was to create a new role in those teams composed of, again, 5 developers, 1 PM, 1 designer. We added one role that's called the Biz in Squad, so the business in squad. And this is typically a person from the sales teams or the customer success team, and they have to spend half a day every week with the squad, the tech and product squad. And their role is really to communicate the decisions that were made by the squad to the rest of the business teams, but also to come with feedback and elaborate on that feedback about whatever the team is working on. And the last thing I think in terms of mindset is transparency in order to get that proactive feedback from our internal teams. We're very lucky we have internal users actually at Aircall and internal power users even. And so here the best is to show what we're working on as early as we can. So of course we do demos, but even earlier than that, we try, to print our designs and display them in the kitchen with like post-its and pens to have people give us feedback, questions, and this is really helpful. We also have our physical roadmap our roadmap that's displayed physically in the office so that people are on board. So yeah, in terms of mindset to be as effective as possible to solve those big problems, I'd say again, involve users, basic but not that easy in B2B, involve the teams internally, and then be super transparent about all the ways, all the steps of the process.
There was some really great stuff in terms of we very much use prototypes to drive on the conversation. We very rarely use prototypes to say this is the finished article. We use prototypes to really drive the conversation and understanding and use them to communicate. A prototype saves 1,000 meetings. That's what we really believe, and having them physically up, makes it really easier. And I love the fact that you're doing that as well. I think your point about having this sort of design sprint, getting the right people in the room and focusing on one problem is something that is just really powerful. There is a tendency to do it for everything, so I completely agree. You have to be quite sparing when you use it, but getting the right data and setting that team up to try and drive to an answer, being clear on what their answer is. We've used that again, really effectively a few times. The tip is not to rely on that all the time. I couldn't agree more. I think that was. Completely agree. Building up the customer empathy, I think that's really powerful. I try and, for myself and for the product leads, is when you can predict what the customer's going to say, that's the point at which you can probably be the voice of the customer. Up until that point, you probably need to do more research and testing. But then also, how do you incorporate the voice of the customer into decision making? I think putting people in customer service, answering the phones for the day, I think it's really powerful. We've put people in each of our team have a go-to person from customer service, a go-to person for risk and compliance, and they come along to use the testing. They come along to the sort of team's rituals, and they give the team feedback on what customers are phoning up and either over-elated about or frustrated about, and that means the team get that good feedback on what customers care about. I think that's really strong, and that's some of that stuff's really hard to put numbers on. It probably wouldn't fit in an OKR, but being able to listen to customers and the team being able to make a decision. Okay, let's just fix that. It's really easy to fix. It's not going to move an OKR, but it'll make the customers, make this subset of customers really happy. Let's just do it. I think that's really powerful and something we've not got perfect, but we're getting there.
Actually, to circle back on that, I think it can be something that's a metric. We're not using OKRs per se, but we really have a big initiative to have customer centricity at the core of our cultures and culture and values for the company. And so typically all the PMs in my team have an objective to see at least 2 clients a month. And this is like something they have to do, otherwise they don't get their bonus. So I think you can make it, concrete and objective.
Okay, no, that's good. That's great. I think so. What I'd love to do now is move on to decision making. You've focused on the right problem. You've come up with either one or a number of solutions. How's the decision made? We do things a specific way here, but I'd love to hear how the panelists, how the panelists drive to that decision. Cinzia, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you do it.
Well, I've already given some of the examples during the first part of this one. So some of the brainstorming exercise, how you make it a decision on what you're going to build. So with grids, we're prioritizing, we're checking with tech, and with the whole of the feedback loop. I think that when we were reading and we were discussing these questions before, I decided that what normally don't is not that much how do you make the decision, but is all good and well going through this process, which is at the basis of everything. But once the decision is made, is actually how you implement it, how do you achieve it, because that's when you actually have to start working. And it got me thinking in preparation to this one, that once I was reading this article and the author was talking about driving to a decision is very much like actually driving the car. And they gave some very good metaphors about it. So where, first of all, you look ahead. You can't only look at the item that is immediately in front of you because you want to see what else is down the road. While you're building, is there going to be any obstacles? You want to be able to report on any risk that might come along the way. You also around you. So is anything changing in the market, in your customer base, in the strategic environment that is likely to impact what you're building? So at strategy level, and that can be for like fairly big features as well as for like entire new product offering, right? In the same way, you keep informing also people on what you're doing. So if you change your mind and you have to steer on one side more than the other one, or maybe delayed some stuff to the benefits of other stuff, and then you want to advise all your main stakeholders, and that goes from tech, goes to customer success, sales, your clients.
But so who makes the decision?
Who makes the business makes the decisions? Then it depends on what I think also what the decision is related. So the business needs to agree on a decision, which is the reason why right at the beginning I said, well, there are a number of exercises that can help you in that process. So everybody agreeing on what's the most important things to build. How to build it is probably more in between a product and tech. So the product side and the designer side, and technically speaking, the developers that help you with that.
So who's the voice of the business that makes the decision so for example, you want to change the way an existing product works? Who's the voice? Who makes the decision as to, right, this is what...
Being the voice of the business and making the decisions is two different things, I think.
Okay, so who makes the decision?
Well, ultimately is you get the signed off from your founder and from all the other head of departments. But if it's about product, I think product makes the decisions, because product will have had to balance properly all the different forces and all the different requirements across all the other departments. So product is most of all product leaders are in that very, can we call it special? It can be also quite dangerous spot where you have to be the scale for everything, but then you need to get the signed off from every part of the business.
Okay. So yeah, I completely.
I don't think it's a single person though. I mean, I've been in situations where maybe the managing director or the COO, they come along, they go like, okay, I'm making an executive decision now, I'm putting my foot down. But maybe because we had reached the point where really there was no full-on agreement that you can make across the business. It's been in very few cases though, very few cases.
So yeah, we're obviously a fintech, so we're regulated in a slightly different way from lots of other people. So we need to be quite clear. For us, we separated it into two camps, which is strategic decisions and tactical decisions. Strategic decisions are made by the CEO, and the leadership team help make the decision, but the decision rests with the CEO. The tactical decisions for products are made by the product leads, and they're 100% accountable for those decisions. And that could be what feature to launch next, what that feature looks like. But through one of the things we've learned over time, or I've definitely learned online, is empowerment means power. Lots of other places talk about empowerment, and they don't give you any power to be empowered. So the way we sort of squared that circle here is, if a team, a product lead, and that's what we call them, product lead, they make all the decisions about the product, and they're accountable for the product. And lots of people, as you said, lots of people want them to make decisions and have an input. Risk, compliance, customers, the CEO. But there's got to be somebody who says, I hear all of you, but I know the most about my customers because I have that customer empathy. I know the most about technology, marketing, and commercials, and the business. I know all about this for these subset of customers and for this product. So I'm accountable for this product, and I make the final decisions. So yeah, I think it's quite interesting how it's done differently.
Yeah, I think that if the product leader and their teams and they do their things right up to that point, which is what all of us have just been speaking about, then it should not come to a surprise, and it should not be a big business shock when the product manager does it. So I've been in the situation here at Cognism. I've been here only for 4 months, and once I started, I had lots of requests and lots of new features, and what was evident that we wanted to build a generation 2 of the product. What also became evident talking with tech is that the CTI thought that it was very important also to rebuild some core part of the databases in order to support the growth certain way. So when I found myself having to do a product strategy for initially 6 months and then for the year ahead, that included a new version, but included also other offerings that we will be working on and some extensions of what we're going to do right after. The input was taken from every head of departments, employees as well as not only the head of department. You know, the more you diversify your audience and the better it is. Lots of this stuff was checked also directly with some of the clients that wanted to be engaged. They wanted to know what's coming up on your roadmap. And then eventually, before presenting it overall, the strategy is double checked and signed off by all of the head of departments. And I think this is not only something that it goes on for product, though, there will be the same for each department head. But at least we are lucky because we are not financial, we're not in the regulatory space of finance.
Yeah, but for me, putting the product leads into place where they had to go and get sign off from lots of different people. For me, I don't think I could hire the quality of caliber of people if I said, you need to get, sign off from 5-6 people. For us, it's the other way around. The product leads for the final decision making. If you want to change their mind, then change their mind. Don't expect them to come off and get your permission. But it's a different way of doing things. Bartek, I'd be really interested to hear how you solve this.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to make one comment in all of this is that it's fundamental. As a head of product, the most important thing that you could ever do is build the strongest possible product team. Because at the end of the day, we just made the analogy of driving a car. If you have an amazing engineering team, but you have an average product team versus vice versa, it's like, having a Ferrari and a Fiat, but the Ferrari is driving in the wrong direction. So you prefer to take the Fiat that's driving in the right direction. You'll get to your destination much faster, much more efficiently. Yeah. And so this whole thing about empowering your product team and giving them full autonomy and making them allowing them to drive that decision forward, to getting all the stakeholders on board and everything that product managers do. Fundamentally, the most important thing is to have literally killer product managers. For me, that's one of my biggest focus, to make sure that we are hiring and building a very A-star product team. Super important.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I identified very quickly is that's exactly right. It's sort of hire get the right person in the product lead position, and it's a lot easier to solve lots of the other problems. I think that's very true. Maïa, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. So we're actually right in the middle of this. So deciding who decides for what. So again, as the company grew, we have today to structure that and have a framework for that. And so we're just trying to build, a DASI framework. So the acronym DASI. So D is for driver, A is for approver, C is for contributor, and I is for informed. The goal is to map out, depending on the type of project, who is in which category. And so this will mostly be dependent on 2 factors: how business critical is the project, so kind of like you were saying before, strategic or tactical. But then the second dimension is how easy is it to roll back and go back to the previous state. So typically, if we have a project to decide whether we want to have a desktop app, which is a new product for us, this is business critical and not easy to roll back. So the driver should always be the PM, but in this case, the approver will be an executive level. On another hand, if you have a project like, adding a customization option in one of our integrations, then the PM will be both the driver and the approver. So right now we're in that process of mapping out those different types of, projects. Hopefully we'll get to 4 or 5 categories max to have that cleared out.
No, I think, so I don't think we're that sophisticated yet. I think, we just did the big thing, which is strategic, CEO, tactical, product lead. I think that's sort of working for now, but I think as we grow over time, it's that's going to break down at some point. So it's I'll come to you, Maïa, in sort of 6-9 months and see how that went. Oh well, that's fantastic. I think I've definitely learned an immense amount. That's some of my thinking confirmed and some of my thinking blown out the water by some of the other panelists. There's a lot for me to go away and think about. And I'd just like to take this time to thank the panelists. I've had a smashing time, and I'd love to continue this conversation offline at some point. But I think now is the time to hand over to Ryan.
All right. Well, thank you. I agree. And I have so much fun because all I want to do is jump in and talk, but instead I just write down a whole bunch of notes and then I'm able to package them all in to sort of wrap it up. And I was listening for specific words that people were using in the process in which to approach problems and then how to solve them. So I came up with a few words that seem to flow together. Now, this isn't hard and fast, but I had to make a decision because my problem was that I had to come up with a recap. So I went through this process to come up with it. The first step, which I heard, is to define. It's that you can't solve something that you don't know. So define first. Second is align, because everyone had some sort of semblance of the team or the KPIs. You had more than just one individual in a room. Then it's about design. Looking to the tech first, I think, is a great concept. Having the helicopter view, looking at how it could be everything from brainstorm to game storm, this idea of designing it and then refining it. And this comes from feedback and data and clear alignment with the metrics and things that you want. Then you combine them together. And it's how do you get your best solutions up there to the top? And that's really by taking what you had refined and then combining it with everyone. And finally, deciding on the decider, because you've got to find somebody to sign on the dotted line. So here's the top recap. Define, align, refine, combine, and find somebody to sign on the dotted line. That is what I took from you as far as something snazzy to put together and do a nice little package to put under someone's Christmas tree to help them in 2019 solve problems. Because if we want to look at predictions, everyone's trying to predict. I predict that each one of you will have problems this year. Big, small, strategic, cultural, all these things. And the more we keep problem solving in the front of our brains, the more important it is. And of all those, define, align, design, refine, combine, and find someone to sign on the dotted line, I truly believe that defining the problem is the biggest. Because I work with CEOs and executives, and when I ask them, what is the single biggest top problem that you are trying to solve? It is not an easy question to answer. And that's because there's multiple and it gets complex. But you got to be able to name it before you can start to attack it. So there we have it. This is our 40th episode this year. If you're interested in these type of high-level conversations from people who are actually living and breathing their scale-ups, this is a place to go. So as you get into this new year and you want to revisit how these ScaleUp Heroes are attacking these problems, you can go to scaleupacademy.io. From all of us here at the ScaleUp Academy, my name is Ryan, and I will say it has been an amazing year, but it's going to be nothing compared to 2019. So I will sign off here for all of us, as this is the end of the year, but with the end of the year becomes the beginning. So we got a lot of problems to attack and to solve. And as long as you guys and girls keep growing, we're going to have plenty of content to talk about. So everybody have a fantastic time, and we will all wave on the count of 3 as we think about define, align, design, refine, combine, and then you sign the dotted line. Adios, everybody. We'll see you next year. Have a great 2019 and beyond.